source supply applied, and the smaller might be the resistance value, okay, and the larger will be the current value that you apply, right? So it's operational here. So another we were discussing is three terminal devices in the resistor. The three terminals are can be illustrated as a symbol over here, where you have your VGS terminal, which will hold to control, which is acting like a control for the resistor. Other two will be the regular resistors. So this could also be called as a voltage control resistor or a variable resistor present in a system. So this variable resistors are very commonly utilized when you are building switches, or you want to implement large resistor values which cannot be implemented with physical resistors. So what do I mean by large resistors? For example, if you want about 10 ohms and 50 ohms, you can still do a physical resistor easily. But when you are looking at 10 kilo ohms or 20 kilo ohms, that kind of an implementation, you would need a large area to be laid out for a resistor. In such scenarios, you would the practice is to use a variable resistor configuration like this as a transistor, and keep the VGS minus VT, the overdrive voltage specific to it, to allow only that much amount of current to flow. You don't want what is the resistors. You will say, okay, I only want about 5 microampere of current to flow. So you can design that to make the ID only be 5 microampere. That is how you design. You don't design a resistor specifically. You would design, okay, an effective saying only amount of current is this needed. So based on that, I will make this act like a resistance. So this is typically you can be used in DAC switches or very coarse DAC. Another one be tuning circuits, current tuning circuits, where you have the other place you could be is what is the current distribution circuits that you could practice on this one. So this will all be places where you could work with, so applications wise. So let's see the pinch off point and the edge of saturation, where we saw your VGS is going to be greater than VT, and VDS is going to be equal to the VD sat. The channel just reaches the drain, meaning the drain is just reached. There is no depletion region beginning anywhere, but with zero inversion in the drain. That means there is no inversion layer or lack of that depletion layer present. Slowly the electrons start to drift from the channel to the drain, right? Then the drain current is given as ID equal to ID max is half mu n Cox omega by L, W by L, VGS minus VT the whole square. This is at the edge of saturation. In saturation mode, what happens? In saturation mode, VGS is greater than VT, but VDS is greater than VGS minus VT. So this is after the pinch off, the ID saturates, and it is relatively independent of what is the VDS value. So that is called your ID saturation or saturation current, and that is also given as half mu n Cox W by L VGS minus VT the whole square. So when you plot the ID versus VDS here, you would see that you have a linear region and then a saturating region and then a region of saturation. So the black curves define the various current responses with respect to what is a VGS supply applied and what is a VDS supply applied, right? If you observe the blue line on this parabolic curve, right, you would observe that anything on the left hand side of this line would be either the edge of saturation or the linear region. So this would be a place where you call your resistive region. And the other flattened regions where the line is almost flat is where you call your saturation region, where there is no change in the value. So the saturation region, the current relationship is quadratic with respect to the input to apply voltage, and it is linear with respect to in the linear region. So that's why you will have your square law of the current came from this terminology. So you would see that some amount of quadratic relationship is there, and this quadratic relationship plays a very important role, and this used to play a very important role. But at some point of time, you would understand what is the amount of saturation that is present and follow it up. So how do you follow that up? In saturation mode, let us understand how it is. A MOSFET can be used as a current source between the drain and the source controlled by the VGS. And this is the common implementation of the current source that is spoken about. And here are the symbols that are used for current source. That is can be from when you're using a PMOS device, you would have a current source from the VDD to the circuits, and when using NMOS device, you would use from the circuit to the ground. So these are the few symbols that are interchangeably used, and they will be understood. So a MOSFET in saturation mode produces a current regulated by VGS. So it's now important to define a figure of merit that identifies the effectiveness of which the MOSFET can convert voltages in currents. And this figure of merit is called a transconductance. Transconductance is defined as the change in the drain current over the change in the gate to source voltage. So it's basically a response to how much of drain current is observed there. And this is a main condition in which is it has to be directly proportional, or you should have VDS being constant across its operation. So if you see this term Gm equal to mu n Cox W by L VGS minus VT, this looks something similar to the resistance, but only it is a transpose of it, or 1 over resistance value would give you the Gm value. So this is the transconductance, and the transconductance plays a role where they basically represents the sensitivity of the device. How sensitive the device is given here, and this also is directly proportional to what is the geometry and the voltage control that is present. So if you want a high GM, a small change in VGS should result in a large change in ID. So if you are designing a high frequency circuit and you would like to have a resistance of 50 ohm, okay, so what would be the equivalent GM value to maintain a 50 ohm? Can somebody do a quick math and tell me? GM equivalent of a 50 ohm.
0.02, sir.
02.
0.02. So that is called 20 millisiemens. Okay?
Yes.
So 20 millisiemens is the value that you have to keep. If you can keep it consistently across all changes without GM being sensitive to VGS change, then you can achieve 50 ohm termination or a 20 ohm in parallel, right? So this is possible. Now this kind of a circuit is going to be used in biasing circuits where you call constant GM circuits. So we'll use methods to find constant GM circuits, and negative feedback will play a very important role in that. So for people who have listened to the negative feedback lecture, you will understand that the first thing that negative feedback is used in log design is to make constant GM circuits. So what is done there? For a given geometry of the device, you would try to keep the VGS minus VT constant across all possible changes, such that the device doesn't change or the variation doesn't change, and the constant GM is maintained and your biasing circuit is maintained. Okay, So we will discuss that a little later again, but just thought you could have a quick understanding of this one. What are the other formulations of GM? GM can be written as square root of 2 times mu n C ox omega by L into ID. So basically you represent the ID factor and take away the use the square law there. Or the other most elegant way that people use, which is process independent, right? And it is geometry independent and depends on only the current and the VGS value, is this one. So GM equal to 2 times ID over VGS minus VT. So this is how you want to constantly maintain a constant GM, where you are not dependent on what is the technology parameters and you're not dependent on the geometry of the device W by L. Though we know that ID contains a response to both of them, but in case if you have a system wherein a constant ID is given to you, then you know what is the VGS minus VT that you have to vary, or your overdrive voltage you can vary, and then maintain or obtain a common GM. Okay, we will see few exercises when I will give you an exercise problem to solve. Right? With yes. What is the behavior of a GM as a function of one parameter while the other parameter remains fixed? For example, for W by L being constant, as you increase overdrive voltage, GM increases linearly. So this is an important graph that you have to always remember. And the second graph to remember is keeping your W by L constant with ID. As you increase ID, GM slowly saturates and it is similar to your ID VDS curve, right? ID by ID to VDS curve, it is there. Another one that you will use you will use this a lot when you're doing biasing circuits. In the last one is when you have an ID is constant, then you vary your VGS minus VTH to obtain and understand what is the response of the current conductance that is seen. So the first one you need to generally remember is the first graph where W by L is a constant and you linearly vary GM by using VGS minus VTH. And the other one is when ID is constant, GM slowly exponentially falls down when VGS minus VTH is increased. So these are the two things you can do. With that said, the channel resistance for small VDS will be directly proportional to ID, provided, like again what Robin said, the value of VDS has to be small and a conducting channel has been induced. So these two things don't work if it is not there in the conducting channel. Okay, for this to happen, for VDS to happen, the MOSFET will be in triode region. Okay, that is one of the reasons, another reasons why people may not use varying transistor in linear mode as opposed to a resistor in when you want to get some performance enhancement. But as you move to higher frequency operations, you would prefer to use a transistor in linear mode than a resistor for its process tracking and voltage tracking abilities, which we will learn a little later in the talk. So what is the channel?
So one question.
Yes.
So actually these graphs are valid only for saturation region, no?
Which one?
The GM versus whatever the things.
Yes, this is applicable for transconductance in PS. I did not say it is there for thing. Like I said, see, it is a continuation of the saturation mode itself. For only to make this channel resistance for small VDS, only the last portion is with triode region, not the entire discussion. Okay. So the graphs are valid only for saturation region, not for linear region.
Yes. 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 Okay.
You understand that one. Okay. So we go next. Any questions now? Okay, if it's not, then we will proceed. So what is the channel resistance for small VDS? Okay, so this we are looking at when do we apply small VDS? So when we do discuss small VDS, we are already discussing the linear mode. So as we increase the value of VDS, the conducting channel will begin to pinch off. The current will no longer be able to be proportional to VDS. So specifically, there are two phenomena at work as we increase VDS while in the triode region. First one, increasing VDS will increase the potential difference across the conducting channel and leads to proportional increase in ID. Further, increasing VDS will decrease the conductivity of the induced channel, leads to decrease in ID. So, how do you differentiate these two? So these two physical phenomena will work as we increase VDS. That's because if you look at the current equation, VDS has got two factors. One, there's a linear factor, the other is a quadratic factor. So you'll have both responses in this particular work. So let us see how this works. So if you take the current equation in a linear region and split them as ID equal to mu n Cox W by L VGS minus VT into VDS. Let's call that ID1. And 1 by 1 over 2 mu n Cox W by L VDS whole square. Let's call that ID2. Okay. So what happens? We'll look at only the first term. In the first term, it is evident that it is the first phenomenon wherein increasing the VDS will increase the potential difference across the conducting channel, leads to a proportional increase in ID. So first term is what you can describe as a resistor. So second term is what it doesn't allow it to behave as a resistor, which is proportional squared to the VDS. So unless if you take the negative term understanding there, so basically it will reduce the amount of ID that is going to flow through, right? So here with smaller VDS values, the question that leads to is, how do you actually till what point do you understand where it works and how do you progress? So that is why now if you carefully in your mind overlay these two graphs, okay, the red graph and the green graph, you will see that at a certain point it will start saturating or dipping, or that is where your pinch off activity will begin, right? Slow saturation will start happening, or the current will start taking up a slope activity like the green curve. You will see how that works here. So this is what is a blue graph I am referring to. Okay. So it is. So what happens is, it is apparent that the second term ID2 works to reduce the total drain current from its resistor like ID1. This of course is physically due to the reduction in channel conductivity as VDS increase. So what happens when, so this is again the argument which you will support saying, when your VDS is very small compared to VGS minus VT, then your ID curve is basically following the ID1 curve, right? The blue curve is typically following the red curve. So in that particular case, we can show that it is very consistent like. So at that range, you can say it works as a resistor. And it starts to degrade as the value approaches the VGS minus VT value. So you have a GM, the conductivity, channel conductivity reducing, and that is why your current is also getting saturated. So what happens is, you could say that when VDS becomes sufficiently large, the induced channel will have a reduced conductivity and the resistor-like behavior is lost, and you will only maintain a resistor-like behavior till just before your VGS minus VT is approached. Okay. Thus, we can conclude that ID will be equal to ID1 for very small VDS, and we can define RDS only for very small VDS, and that is defined as VDS over ID, which is called RDS is 1 over mu n C, 1 over mu n C of omega by W by L, VGS minus VT. So this is always defined for small VDS. So this is typically a question that I used to get when I was introduced to this in my engineering days. So like, okay, you say small. So how small is small? Is what I used to have a question. So there used to be a relative answer saying, okay, the small is when till ID2 is insignificant, this is small. When ID2 becomes significant, it is large. So how does ID2 become significant? The question used to be that what is the only common terms which are affecting is the VDS terminology. So if the VDS square term is smaller than VGS minus VT, very small, such that it doesn't cause an significant change in the ID2, then it is applicable. So mathematically that used to be later defined, which I understood also later, was your magnitude of ID2 has to be very small compared to magnitude of ID1. So it has to be insignificant and given the change. So how do you define that? Half mu n Cox W by L VDS square should be very small compared to mu n Cox W by L VGS minus VT into VDS. So which gives the result that the VDS has to be very small compared to 2 times VGS minus VT. So what does this mean? Let us take an example. If your VGS minus VT is say 50 millivolt, so 2 times 50 millivolt is 100 millivolt. So if your VDS in that particular case is about only 1/10 or 10 millivolt, it is very small. 1 millivolt even better, 10 millivolt is very small. Now just imagine what kind of circuits can produce a 10 millivolt change in your circuit. One is a very strong noise that can come at the output, or a very weak signal coming at there. So a strong noise and weak signal at these ranges are typically observed in RF circuit in the input, for example in the LNAs, where you are working with a very small amount of input values and you want to make a larger value. You understand that is only the case where you see. Otherwise, when you build something called a large signal, like how Robin just described in his power amplifier, a large signal, you will need a larger VDS value. So the moment the VDS is within the large signal domain, this is not applicable. Okay. So it should always be that your VDS is very small compared to VGS minus VT. So just remember that if you can practically, if anywhere between 1/5 or 1/10, if you can able to get it, you know that you're within limits of having a very good resistor. But the moment you cross the 1/5 or 1/10 value of your VGS, your overdrive voltage, you will not see a resistive like action. So it is a number good to be remembering it. So any questions still here? Okay, exactly what I was just mentioning. Thus, we would see that the when we can approximate the induced channel only when VDS is less than twice the excess voltage, or as given there. So this is what I just said. If we want the error associated to the approximation to be less than 10%, we can require that the VDS to be less than 10% the value. In other words, if VDS is less than 10% is good enough. This is the analogy that I used is not here, but I found it easier to understand the other way, wherein if I want a resistor to act, I will keep it as 1/10 or 1/5, which is similar to close to the noise voltage. Okay, so that is the kind of easier to understand number that I used to get in my head, and I used to follow. The mathematical reason is given as here. So this eventually became a rule of thumb in electronics. So this does not mean this is the correct criteria, but it is a good place to work. For some other cases, especially when you work with RF circuits, you would require this to be less than 5% the error. This can be much more easier. Now, why is 5 and 10 used? 5 and 10 used because these are easier to numbers and make circuit analysis much easier. Okay. Another thing is you should understand when this, which of these makes a better understanding during a circuit analysis. They have to be valid and they have to make your analysis simpler. This you would use 1 by 1/10 and 1/20th in design as a rule of thumb, but when you do analysis, you have to be very thorough with it. So there is a difference between a design and an analysis. So what is analysis? Already an existing circuit is present and you do mathematical understanding to understand what is the analysis that it is going through. But when you're designing it, you should already know what could happen and include that in your design space and then keep the value there to understand how much of it is going to satisfy and give the satisfying result for you. Okay, so circuit analysis is important, but even when you're doing circuit design, when you do not know what architecture to use, do not know how to use, you first place it in your design and then you do an analysis, see if it is fitting your solution. Okay, any questions?
Actually, I got disconnected from the call. So can you repeat this? What is application of this VDS should be less than 1/10 of this?
This is typical. It's a typical approval.
So you mean if you want to bias in triode region, we'll use this?
Yes, typically that's where you use. If you want a resistive-like action or you want to bias in triode region, this is how you do it. This is why it is important in biasing. So how do you bias it? You find out what is the VGS minus VT value that you need, understand what is the overdrive voltage, which is that, and then understand how much of your VDS is going to appear. Meaning it has to be only a small signal that has to appear. You cannot appear, a large signal cannot be coming. For example, this cannot appear at the output node of an amplifier where it will swing, the signal will swing for a large swings. It cannot come, it may come at the input side of an amplifier, but still it can affect. So typically this is used for current control, right? Where you understand that the swing of VDS is going to be very limited compared to the VGS minus VT, so and you proceed from there.